Everyone, welcome to another Classic Movie Monday. I apologize this is being uploaded late. Unfortunately, I've been not feeling so incredibly well lately, so I've kind of been delaying videos for now, but I am all right and ready to go to be up to date with all of the videos. So you will be getting all of the videos today. And that means Monday's video through Thursday's video, as well as Friday's video should be on time as well. But we'll see if I will have time on 4th of July to upload things on time. Yeah, basically, without further ado, let me discuss what I want to discuss for this Classic Movie Monday, and that is the film Alien. And yes, I mean the first film within the Aliens series. Some people, I think, like to argue whether or not which film in particular is better. I don't think they necessarily outdo each other, but I think they both hold up as interesting films. I'm just going to be discussing the first film today, and then maybe within the future I will discuss the sequel. But this film was made in 1979, and it looks a lot like something that was made during that era. And at the same time, though, it provides something unique and interesting. So that is why I feel that it should be classified as a classic. And the interesting thing, really, about this movie is how it tries to combine genres. In particular sci-fi with horror, which again is not something that is really all too common to do. Usually it's action, science fiction, or being the most common combination. So there are a lot of slow-moving bits within this film, and a lot of atmosphere that's developed within this film, and I think that's what actually makes it rather interesting and unique, is that it knows how to establish establish its emotions well, on a visual level, on an acting level, on a character level, and it, I think, ultimately provides what you would expect out of such a combination of genres. Now, as far as what this film is about, and as far as story is concerned, basically there are these crew members of a commercial starship, and basically they're apparently coming home actually from a mission, and they're sort of in a hypersleep state, which you will see within the beginning of the film, and they all wake up, and they manage to ultimately discover an alien. And you will see how exactly they do that if you choose to watch the film. But basically, once the alien is discovered, it's pretty much chaos and survival mode, which the crew members basically have to kind of try to figure out. Although it is noted that Ripley, in particular as a character, is one of the more focal characters, since she also appears within the second film, but I wouldn't necessarily put her as really a standout. Personally for me, and since this is sort of Sigourney Weaver kind of up and coming, I think that her performance is good. I just don't think, as far as the film is structured, that it was trying to really focus in on one character. And I think that's sort of a good thing, because it leaves the sort of predictability level low, because you're not exactly sure who's going to live and who's going to die necessarily. So I think that was actually a fairly smart move, because it did leave me at the end fairly unexpected, because it again didn't try to hone in on one particular character so much. Whereas within the second film, Ripley's the hero, and the second one I think kind of goes into levels of cliche. Um, Whereas this film I think tries to have this kind of interesting, unique blend to itself. But again, when I review that film, I'll be sure to discuss that. But there might also be some things that are unique to the second film, but I will try to address that once I get to that. But basically, this film tries to, again, there is the element of horror as in shock, and also it has a certain amount of level of gore. But I wouldn't say it is as gory as some other projects that I've seen. Yeah, I mean the scene where there's this one guy who gets literally destroyed in a very twisted and demented kind of way uh, doesn't necessarily reflect onto my taste as far as films are concerned. Um, just that whole idea or concept to me is it's just very gross. But I think that's really what the film sort of intends. It tries to make you feel very uncomfortable. But I would say if you don't really like that kind of a style, if you don't like to have this uncomfortable surrounding, then this film is definitely not going to be one that you're going to enjoy. But regardless, I think it does that so well that it really makes it, I think, a standout as far as science fiction is concerned. And they do really try to establish a sense of the universe, sort of similar to Star Trek and Star Wars. Although that's not as much of a center focus like in Star Wars and Star Trek, they do try to kind of introduce you to kind of the things that sort of exist within this world, like the aliens and um, certain uh, you know ideas and concepts that kind of exist within the world are also discussed. But largely in part, this film is really essentially about survival. Um, and really that's at its heart. And even though I will say not necessarily all of the characters really do stand out as much, I still feel like that they present an overall likability. So again, and I think this was the thing that this film wanted to do. It didn't want to make one character in particularly that interesting for the sake of us kind of guessing who ultimately is going to survive and who ultimately is not. So again, I think that's really a smart move, and usually one that we don't see in a lot of films that try to sort of do this uh, scenario of survival. We usually get an understanding of who's going to live and who is going to die. Um, so I think that's really the the thing that this film does a really good job of. Um, are there points where it kind of feels a little bit slower than some films and it might drive people's patience a bit? I can see that. I mean, I feel like there are certain points that maybe span out a little bit too long for my taste, but I could understand why a lot of people would gravitate towards something like that because they like the sense of suspense. And I think in certain parts it really works, especially when you have the alien sort of running loose on the ship. Um, that really adds tension. But these long standing shots of just, how the ship looks like and, just all that stuff kind of, I just feel it's a little bit overboard. Um, but despite that, it's very visually stunning as far as how everything looks. I just feel like it's a little bit slow moving. But I think that's sort of similar to how a lot of other sci-fi films, in particular Star Wars, that came out during the time. There are these kinds of slow moments where they're just showcasing you the visual, and you're just kind of like, okay, okay. My attention span's maybe a little bit, a little bit higher than this, but I think there's a lot that people can appreciate about this film if you really enjoy science fiction, if you don't mind the horror elements that are within the film, if you don't mind a little bit of violence and a little bit of tension, um, and you don't mind feeling uncomfortable, then this film is designed for that audience. But if you are not that kind of a movie film goer, then I would suggest not taking the leap with this film. But again, I will say that it is a classic because largely in part of how it blends the two genres of horror and science fiction. Um, Visually, I think also is another that I also mentioned is I think another really big draw. I mean, a lot of it really does look real, and you really do awe at these effects. And I almost wish they would go back to these kinds of effects because I think they really do give you something that does feel very real. Um, and as far as just the way the story is ultimately orchestrated, I think it really suits itself well because, again, it doesn't try to hone in on one particular character. You feel like the characters are kind of given a blank slate medium to work with, so you don't really necessarily know as far as what's going to happen. And I think this is another theme that this film plays fairly well with too, is the concept of the unknown and being alone and isolated. So yeah, I think that really ultimately works well also too to the film's advantage. But as far as characters are concerned, I think some people like to think Ripley as this big action hero, which they associate with her within the second film. But within this film, she's not, I think, as much of a standout character as the others, um, because ultimately, you'll see how she has her opinions and her conclusions, and the other crew members sometimes differ from her. Um, Sometimes even maybe to their detriment. But at the same time, I didn't feel like it was shoved onto me this idea of, oh, she's the perfect hero, and I liked that it didn't focus on that. I liked that it was just pure survival, and not trying to make somebody into the savior. So I think that ultimately works well for the film too. It makes it rather unique because usually in a lot of these sci-fi films we do seek sort of like the hero kind of stand up, or somebody has that kind of a cliche quality to them. But I liked how in this character they really downplayed her as far as her being that kind of um, hero messiah. So I think that's also something that really works to the film's advantage, because she's just a person who um, manages to pull through. Um, but I won't give away who lives and who dies uh, within the film as far as the other characters are concerned. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this film without really giving too much away. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.